Manasseh even made a carved image of Asherah and set it up in the temple, the very place where the Lord had told David and his son Solomon, "My name will be honored forever in this temple and in Jerusalem, the city I have chosen from among all the tribes of Israel. If the Israelites will be careful to obey my commands, all the laws my servant Moses gave them, I will not send them into exile from this land that I gave their ancestors." But the people refused to listen, and Manasseh led them to do even more evil than the pagan nations that the Lord had destroyed when the people of Israel entered the land. Not only did Manasseh himself turn away from the Lord, but he set up all sorts of other things that led the rest of the people to turn away from the Lord. He might as well have been mocking God by setting up all these pagan things in the temple, which was supposed to be dedicated to worshiping the Lord. What's up, cool people? My name's Matt. Welcome back to our Bible study. All right. 2 Kings 21. So, Judah's the only kingdom left. Hezekiah has passed away after resisting the Assyrians, getting sick, being healed, and then being told that Israel is going to be conquered by the Babylonians, essentially, and that they're going to take all the stuff away from the treasury and whatnot. So, the signs are there that Judah is also going to be conquered, and essentially, God's chosen people will not have their own land that is, ruled by them and only them. Eventually. But, yeah. I don't know if there's too much else to say. If something comes up that needs more context from previous chapters and verses, I will do my best to give you that. But here we go. 2 Kings chapter 21. By the way, this Manasseh guy was the son of the previous king, Hezekiah. So, Manasseh was 12 years old when he became king, and he reigned in Jerusalem 55 years. His mother was Hephzibah. He did what was evil in the Lord's sight, following the detestable practices of the pagan nations that the Lord had driven from the land ahead of the Israelites. He rebuilt the pagan shrines his father Hezekiah had destroyed. He constructed altars for Baal and set up an Asherah pole, just as King Ahab of Israel had done. He also bowed before all the powers of the heavens and worshipped them. He built pagan altars in the temple of the Lord, the place where the Lord had said, "My name will remain in Jerusalem forever." He built these altars for all the powers of the heavens in both courtyards of the Lord's temple. Manasseh also sacrificed his own son in the fire. He practiced sorcery and divination, and he consulted with mediums and psychics. He did much that was evil in the Lord's sight, arousing his anger. Okay, jeez. So, Hezekiah was definitely one of the better kings that Judah had had as far as loyalty to the Lord. Hezekiah had even torn down a bunch of pagan shrines and altars and things like that. But now his son is undoing all that and is going the complete opposite direction, which is not a good sign for the future of the kingdom of Judah. This might be sort of the beginning of the end, so to say, as far as Judah's downfall. So yeah. I don't know if I really have a whole lot else to say. That's kind of the general gist of these first 6 verses here. Manasseh did a lot of things that God did not like. Essentially undoing any goodwill that the Lord would have had toward Judah at that point. Or at least a lot of it. Note there, could be read as made his son pass through the fire instead of sacrificed his son in the fire. I think I mentioned this possibility in a previous note that was, like, the same, essentially, in a prior chapter, but, like, the best case scenario here is that there was some foreign pagan ritual that involved, you know, having people go through fire. There is nothing in God's commands that say to do that for any reason. So, even if it wasn't necessarily sacrificing, it was still like, okay, this isn't what God told you to do. Why are you doing this? You're following these other pagan practices and probably worshiping other gods by doing this. Which means you're not loyal to the Lord. So, yeah, bad thing. Okay. And we're continuing with this line of thought, seemingly, in verse 7. Manasseh even made a carved image of Asherah and set it up in the temple, the very place where the Lord had told David and his son Solomon, "My name will be honored forever in this temple and in Jerusalem, the city I have chosen from among all the tribes of Israel. If the Israelites will be careful to obey my commands, all the laws my servant Moses gave them, I will not send them into exile from this land that I gave their ancestors." But the people refused to listen, and Manasseh led them to do even more evil than the pagan nations that the Lord had destroyed when the people of Israel entered the land. So yeah, just further driving home the point that not only did Manasseh himself turn away from the Lord, but he set up all sorts of other things that led the rest of the people to turn away from the Lord. He even essentially, he might as well have been mocking God by setting up all these pagan things in the temple, which was supposed to be dedicated to worshiping the Lord. And he's like, meh, I don't care. I don't really worship that God anyway. I'm going to set up all this other stuff to all these other gods. I don't really have too much else to say on that. Otherwise, I feel like I'd be just dragging out the point. Hang on a sec. Chat comment. Kind of like one person in a church starting division, and it spreads through. I mean, I guess in a way, I can't say I have, like, seen that happen firsthand, but, I mean, especially with this guy Manasseh being the king, it's basically like, you know, okay, let's say we're in the US, which I know at least you and I are, and it's like, okay, this president, you know, we had this president who set up all these kinds of things, all these programs to help people and all sorts of stuff like that. And then the next president comes in and is like, nah, those are all gone. We're just gonna do the complete opposite of that. 'Cause I think that kind of thing is what's wrong with our country. I don't believe in that stuff being any kind of helpful. We're going to go the complete opposite direction. Even just that in and of itself can cause division, can cause people to go in different directions with things, just because it's like, we had this, it didn't seem like there was an issue with it, but now we're doing this? Like, just because the guy in charge says it doesn't mean that it's inherently right. They can't both be right if they're going complete opposite directions. But some people will say, well, this guy's in charge. He's got to at least kind of know what he's doing. So let's follow his example. I was just meaning that his practices infected others to want to do the same thing, and yeah. But yeah, that's the basic point. It's like, especially as the leader, this guy has extra impact and influence to have people say, you know, to have people go along with what he's doing. Okay. Then on to verse 10. Then the Lord said through his servants the prophets, King Manasseh of Judah has done many detestable things. He's even more wicked than the Amorites who lived in this land before Israel. He has caused the people of Judah to sin with his idols. So this is what the Lord, the God of Israel, says. I will bring such disaster on Jerusalem and Judah that the ears of those who hear about it will tingle with horror. I will judge Jerusalem by the same standard I used for Samaria and the same measure I used for the family of Ahab. I will wipe away the people of Jerusalem as one wipes a dish and turns it upside down. Then I will reject even the remnant of my own people who are left, and I will hand them over as plunder for their enemies. For they have done great evil in my sight, and have angered me ever since their ancestors came out of Egypt. Yeah, so this really is pretty much spelling it out, that it's like, alright, this is where we've gone too far off the rails. The end of this kingdom begins now. Now, note there at idols, Hebrew term literally means round things and probably alludes to dung. I've seen that in a few prior chapters, but it's basically God saying that these things that the people are worshiping are piles of crap, to put it bluntly. They're waste. They're useless. Yeah. There's like nothing good about them. They can't even do anything. And then he mentions judging Jerusalem by the same standard as Samaria. Samaria was the capital of the northern kingdom of Israel, which got taken over. Talking about the family of Ahab. Ahab was a particular king of the kingdom of Israel who God actually specifically chose someone to go throughout Samaria and the other towns of Israel and, like, specifically, methodically wipe out all of Ahab's descendants. And now he's saying Jerusalem is going to be judged by that same measure. So yeah, not good. Hebrews says, the same plumb line I used for Samaria and the same plumb bob. I assume that's kind of a almost more... I don't know if poetic is quite the right way. More symbolic way of saying the same thing. I'm not super familiar with those terms, but still. I guess, since standard and measure are slightly different terms, that would line up with plumb line versus plumb bob. Anyway. Feel free to add a little more information on that in comments or whatever, if someone knows a bit better on that. But I assume it essentially means the same kind of thing. So yeah, judgment is coming, essentially is what that means. And honestly, like, even with this last verse here, yeah, the people... God's chosen people have been all, like, back and forth at best on worshiping the Lord ever since they left Egypt. So even just with that, it's like God could be sort of like, okay, this is the last straw. These people have proven they're not gonna stay loyal. Even after, like, one of the best, most loyal kings, they immediately turn away. God didn't say that per se, but in the context, it's like that's what happened. Alright. Verse 16. Manasseh also murdered many innocent people until Jerusalem was filled from one end to the other with innocent blood. This was in addition to the sin that he caused the people of Judah to commit, leading them to do evil in the Lord's sight. The rest of the events in Manasseh's reign and everything he did, including the sins he committed, are recorded in the book The History of Kings of Judah. When Manasseh died, he was buried in the palace garden, the Garden of Uzzah. Then his son Ammon became the next king. Now, I guess, since it's in the palace garden, it's still in Jerusalem. Might not necessarily be at the same grave site. The way it was worded before, it was like it made it sound like most of the prior kings of Judah had pretty much been buried in the same spot. Or at least the same, graveyard, so to speak. Same general area. I mean, this was probably at least within the same city then, but maybe not quite the same spot. I don't know if there's any particular significance to that. I'm just pointing out that it's definitely worded different. So, yeah. Manasseh, very bad king for Judah's connection with the Lord. And then comes the next king of Judah, starting in verse 19. Ammon was 22 years old when he became king, and he reigned in Jerusalem 2 years. His mother was Meshullemeth, the daughter of Haruz from Jotbah. He did what was evil in the Lord's sight, just as his father Manasseh had done. He followed the example of his father, worshipping the same idols his father had worshipped. He abandoned the Lord, the God of his ancestors, and he refused to follow the Lord's ways. Then Ammon's own officials conspired against him and assassinated him in his palace. But the people of the land killed all those who had conspired against King Ammon, and they made his son Josiah the next king. The rest of the events in Ammon's reign and what he did are recorded in the book of the history of kings of Judah. He was buried in his tomb in the Garden of Uzzah. Then his son Josiah became the next king. Not a whole lot about Ammon, but, since he only ruled 2 years, maybe not a whole lot to talk about. As opposed to his father, who had ruled for, I think it said 55 years? Yeah, 55. But basically, he continued to do the same kinds of things that Manasseh did, which was not good in the Lord's eyes. And I don't know if this is going to start a trend of kings of Judah being assassinated, but, yeah. That, became a trend for Israel shortly before it got conquered by the Assyrians. So, that could very well be another sign of Judah and its impending fate at the hands of the Babylonians. I could say that and not have it be any kind of spoiler or whatever, because that was mentioned in a prophecy in the previous chapter. So, yeah, I don't really have any more thoughts on this chapter. I guess that'll do it for 2 Kings chapter 21. So, after King Hezekiah reigned in Judah and was one of the better, more loyal kings, more loyal to the Lord, his son and grandson then wind up being pretty much the exact opposite. They set up all these pagan altars and things like that all over the place, including in the temple, and worshipped them and led the other people of Judah to worship them. And so, yeah, that right there is big sign number one of the imminent invasion or whatever from Babylon, because it was prophesied in the last chapter that Babylon would come and take everything from Judah. So, yeah, it's pretty much just a matter of time at this point. But it's possible sign number 2 of that coming fairly soon in the next few chapters or so is the assassination of the second king mentioned. If that sets up a pattern, like it became with Israel just before Assyria took over them, I mean, like, rapid change of kings like that, or leaders in general, leads to generally a lessening of power, and certainly a lessening of stability. So, anyway, yeah, we'll see how that turns out as we progress further through 2 Kings. But that's it for this one. So as always, like and share if you enjoyed the video, subscribe to the channel to get updates when I post new videos. If you're inclined to click the bell, go ahead and do that. That should make extra sure you get updates on most of my stuff at least. Look down in the description for info on other social media pages and all sorts of other ways to keep up with what I'm doing across the internet, if you want to be extra sure about all that. And down below the description, leave comments with any thoughts or questions you have. So that's going to do it for now. Hope you're all doing well. Hopefully I'll see you soon for another video, but whatever the case is, until next time, stay cool, people.